The Prince of Swords from Joe Bandel's Oak Tarot of Love and Romance presents a striking departure from the traditional image of an impulsive, scattered youth, instead offering a portrait of someone defined by a fierce independence and an intense inner fire. In Bandel's depiction, we see a young man clad in practical dark leather with silver accents, standing defiantly against a backdrop of opposition. He's not just holding a sword, he's encased within a protective triangle of three smaller swords, a symbol of mental clarity and boundaries, while a sturdy oak tree stands firm beside him, mirroring his own rootedness. It's an image that challenges the typical romantic ideal of soft vulnerability, suggesting instead that a stable sense of self is the ultimate foundation for growth, even if that means standing entirely alone.
It's a visually electric card. When you look at those deep grays and electric silvers, you immediately feel that tension. Unlike the traditional Rider-Waite Smith Knight of Swords, who is often seen as charging recklessly into battle without a plan, this prince has a set jaw and sharp eyes that suggest a much more calculated, almost stoic determination. The oak tree is the crucial anchor here. In the oak matrix, which Bandel developed as a unified field theory for relationships, the oak represents the loving embrace of opposites. But for the Prince of Swords, that embrace begins within. He's honest to a fault, and that honesty acts as a double-edged blade. It provides the clarity needed to navigate conflict, but as the card notes, it can also manifest as bitterness or anger if he feels his path is being blocked by a partner or society.
I'm interested in that specific visual of the protective triangle, three swords surrounding him like a geometric barrier. In a romantic context, we often talk about tearing down walls to find intimacy. But this card seems to argue that those walls, or at least these mental boundaries, are actually what allow the prince to maintain his integrity. If the prince represents a stage of development where one refuses to compromise their identity for the sake of a relationship, does that triangle represent a healthy boundary, or is it a sign of defensive isolation? There's a fine line between "I know who I am" and "I won't let you in."
That's the central tension of this archetype. The triangle represents the mind's ability to protect the inner fire Bandel mentions. If you look at the male experience of this card, it's often about feeling at odds with the world. He's practical, represented by that dark leather, and he's not interested in the fluff or the social niceties of dating. He wants the truth. For him, the triangle isn't necessarily about keeping people out, it's about keeping the self intact. However, the female experience of this energy, whether it's a woman embodying it or a woman interacting with a man like this, often registers as distance. You're drawn to that strength and that unwavering honesty, but then you realize the intensity of his focus leaves very little room for the we in the relationship. He stands alone, and while that's a sign of growth, it creates a vacuum where a partner might expect a bridge.
It reminds me of a study published in the journal Nature Human Behavior about the psychological cost of extreme independence. People who score high on self-reliance often report higher levels of personal achievement, but lower levels of perceived social support. The Prince of Swords embodies this perfectly. He's the guy who won't ask for directions even if the relationship is driving off a cliff because his internal compass is his only trusted authority. But let's look at that oak tree again. An oak doesn't grow by moving around. It grows by sinking roots deeper into the same spot. In Bandel's framework, this rootedness is a form of defiance. It says, "I will not be moved by your expectations." But in a modern romance where compromise is touted as the highest virtue, how does one actually live as a Prince of Swords without destroying the relationship?
It requires a shift in how we view honesty. According to research on relationship communication from the University of Rochester, perceived honesty is one of the strongest predictors of relationship satisfaction, even when the truth is difficult to hear. The Prince of Swords excels at this. He won't lie to make you feel better, which sounds harsh, but it's actually a form of deep respect. He treats his partner as an equal who can handle the truth. The problem arises when that honesty lacks diplomacy. There's a difference between saying, "I need space to maintain my sense of self," and "you're suffocating me." The prince's breathing is described as quick with passion, which tells us he isn't cold. He's just burning so hot for his own truth that he forgets to check if the fire is singeing the people around him.
And that brings up the opposition mentioned in the card's description. He stands alone against a backdrop of opposition. In a relationship, that opposition might not be a villain. It might just be the partner's legitimate needs. If the partner says, "I need more emotional availability," the prince might interpret that as an attack on his independence. He sees it as the world pushing back. So he grips the sword tighter. He sets his jaw. He leans into the oak tree. Is there a point where standing alone stops being growth and starts being a sophisticated form of avoidance? If you're always true to yourself, but that self is always solitary, are you actually growing or are you just static?
Standing alone is growth when it's a choice made out of strength rather than a reaction made out of fear. Bandel's prince isn't hiding, he's standing defiantly, he's present. If he were avoiding, he'd be looking away, but his eyes are sharp and his face is intense. He's looking right at the conflict. The growth comes from the realization that his stability doesn't depend on the partner's approval. This is what psychologists call differentiation of self, the ability to be in a close relationship without losing your individual identity. The prince is the extreme end of that spectrum. For a partner to meet this energy, they can't ask him to soften. If you try to take the leather off him or take the sword away, you're asking him to become a page or a knight, someone less formed. The goal isn't to change him, but to find where the oak tree's shadow provides room for two.
That's a tough sell in a culture that prioritizes merging. We're told that two become one. The Prince of Swords says, no, one stays one and another one stays one, and maybe we stand near each other. It's very much in line with Bandel's oak matrix idea that duality isn't war, but an embrace of opposites. The prince represents the intellectual fire side of that duality. He provides the clarity and the electric silver energy that prevents a relationship from becoming stagnant or overly enmeshed. But he has to learn that his protective triangle of swords doesn't have to be a weapon. It can be a fence with a gate. If he's honest to a fault, then the fault is the lack of a bridge.
Exactly, and for the person on the other side of that triangle, the female experience mentioned, there's a unique challenge. You're drawn to his integrity. There's something incredibly attractive about a person who knows exactly who they are and won't budge. It feels safe. But that same integrity is what keeps you at arm's length. You have to learn to value the honesty over the comfort. If he tells you something you don't want to hear, you have to recognize that he's giving you the most valuable thing he has, his unfiltered perspective. He's not being angry or bitter to hurt you. He's doing it because his path is blocked and his primary drive is movement and truth. He's a young man who would rather be right and alone than happy and delusional.
There's a specific irony in the fiery accents against the deep grays and silver. It suggests that his passion is actually what fuels his cold logic. It's not that he's emotionless, it's that his emotions are so intense they've been forged into a blade. This is a person who cares so much about their purpose or their principles that everything else becomes secondary. In a romantic context, that looks like the partner who will choose their career or their creative calling over a date night if that calling is what's true in that moment. It's a hard pill to swallow, but if you're with a Prince of Swords, you're essentially dating an oak tree. You can't expect it to move for you, but you can rely on it to be there when the storm hits.
And that stability is the payoff. When the world pushes back against the couple, the prince doesn't crumble. He's already used to standing against opposition. He becomes the protector, not through soft cuddles, but through that protective triangle of swords. He will fight for the relationship's right to exist on its own terms, just as he fights for his own. He reminds us that real love isn't about two people becoming less of themselves to fit together, but about two people becoming more of themselves because the other person provides a stable ground to stand on. He represents the stage where we stop looking for a partner to complete us and start looking for a partner who can stand beside us while we complete ourselves.
It's a call to arms for the individual. We've spent so much time talking about communication as sharing everything, but the Prince of Swords suggests that the most important communication is the one you have with yourself. Are you being honest about who you are? Are you standing firm in your own practical leather? Or are you wearing someone else's clothes? The prince challenges us to find our own inner fire and to protect it, not as an act of war, but as an act of self-preservation. It's the only way to ensure that when we do enter the loving embrace Bandel talks about, there's actually a self there to do the embracing.
And that's the final takeaway. Standing alone isn't the end goal, it's the prerequisite. You have to be able to stand firm like that oak tree before you can truly offer shade to anyone else. The Prince of Swords isn't a permanent state of being. He's a prince after all, he's still growing. But he represents the necessary fire that burns away the false compromises that clutter most romances. He's the clarity that comes after the confusion. He reminds us that if a relationship requires you to soften until you're unrecognizable, it's not a relationship, it's a cage. And he has the sword to cut the bars.
It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the most romantic thing you can do is refuse to change for someone else, because a love built on a lie is no love at all. If this exploration of the prince's fierce independence resonated with you, please share this episode with someone who might need to hear that standing alone is a valid form of growth.